Welcome to Section 2, Communications and Terminology. It's important to understand the way we talk. And if I'm going into a counselor, I'm not walking in and saying, hey, I was born on a beautiful day in June. Oh, the birds were chirping, the wind, it was gentle. No, I'm going in there because maybe something's bothering me, nightmares, sleeps, and dreams, and I get right to the point. It was a head-on collision. I leaned in to see if the passenger was all right, and their head almost fell off on their lap. And as a counselor, you have to understand that pain that person is feeling, that firefighter is feeling, and understanding too that you can't give these, oh, that's awful, I don't want, oh, that's awful to hear. You have to be very stoic, almost like you've heard this time and time again, because with us, it's credibility. It's all about credibility. Will I be able to open up my heart? And I'm thinking, boy, I haven't even gotten to the dark stuff yet, and you're already starting to cringe. And so this section will go over some of the terminology and things that you need to know, the pride that we carry both in the rigs that we ride on and those sections of the job task. So let's go into this right now. And terminology ranks, important things to know. Ask questions of your fire and EMS. What is your rank? These are important because each one is individually different. I believe the most difficult position in the fire service is the lieutenant's rank because they have to be with their people day in and day out. And yet they have to uphold management's policies and procedures. And that puts a lot of stress on as a lieutenant. But let's start right at the top. The chief. The chief wears 5 bugles. They're a little pin, an insignia, and it has 5 bugles on it. Deputy chief will have 4 bugles. A assistant chief will have 3 bugles. And why is this important? Because it just shows you the rank. Deputy chief is second in command. They will help assist with the budget and maybe oversee policies and procedures, whereas assistant chief will also do that same thing in smaller departments. And then you have battalion chiefs. Their 2 bugles are crossed. Battalion chiefs typically run a few stations, but if it's a smaller department, they might only run one station. But they're the incident command of the scenes. Then the next rank after the battalion chief is the captain. There are 2 bugles, which are just straight up and down. And the final bugle goes to the lieutenant. You need to understand their ranks and the stressors they go under, because in our suicide information that we found over these past 5 years, there's no discrimination amongst who's taking their lives, from firefighters all the way up to fire chiefs. And a lot has to do with the strength of who they are, but also the stress that they're under within that position. Other questions you might need to ask are you career, a volunteer, paid on call? And what's the difference? Well, career department, that's your job. You're there, and then you go home. Whereas a volunteer, you're typically within your own community. And then a paid on call is very similar to a volunteer, but they just get money, maybe $5, $6 a call to go on to help offset, some gas and training, that aspects. Not a lot of paid on calls, more volunteers. Now, quick information for you, there's about 1.1 million firefighters in the United States. Approximately 670,000 of those are volunteers. So you can see where we have issues of volunteers trying to find good counseling. Because I get phone calls on a weekly basis from firefighters and fire chiefs from all over this country saying, Jeff, do you have someone in my area that I can call that understands our culture? And believe me, there are some remote areas that are out there that there's no towns, no cities around, no counselors, no chaplains, and yet they are facing the same challenges, maybe not as often as career firefighters. But I always believed it was more difficult as a volunteer firefighter because when the tones went off for a full arrest, I knew who that person was. Child run over by a lawnmower. I knew that child and that family. Or when you're out in the middle of the cornfield because of a head-on collision and people rolled and the cars rolled and people were ejected, and then you had to be at your full-time job 3-4 hours later. There was not a lot of help for you, and it was difficult. You held those images within your mind for days and days. You didn't have anyone to talk to at the fire station like you do at career. And one big difference, of course, is in most departments and career, you usually didn't live within that city. Whereas within the volunteer, that's your community. So it's important to understand and know that aspect when you talk to firefighters or EMS. So another question to ask is years on the job. We've had many 18-year-olds take their lives, mainly volunteer firefighters, because of the things that they've seen. But also don't forget those who've been on many years and the amount of tragic events that they've been to and holding that in because of that cultural brainwashing. That plays a major role within the fire and EMS service. So years on the job is an important question. Call volume. Is there a difference? Yes and no. Because call volumes, if you're running on just basically 35 calls a year, you might not see the tragic events that happen when those that run 100,000 calls a year. So it's important to understand. But even so, it might just be one call that turns a person's life. That was always a big question within the fire service. How do you go, two firefighters or two paramedics go on a call, and one is affected by it, maybe it's a drowning, and the other one is not as deeply affected by it. And yet then they go on a call later on that evening for a cancer patient. And now the person who wasn't deeply affected on the earlier call is now really suffering. And it's because you do not know what's going on in their life. Maybe a parent or a loved one is suffering from cancer. And so that aspect of it can come into play. So always talk about, the amount of calls that they run per shift and what calls recently have bothered them. It's important to know, are they a firefighter, a paramedic, or are they both? Do they do both? It's important to understand the relationship. Firefighters, if they're just strictly firefighters, they'll go on an EMS call and then they go home to the station, where the paramedics will have to take care of that patient all the way to the hospital. And so they build a relationship with that patient, if it's a full arrest or something that's very tragic. And so they bury it within themselves. So understanding what that role is. The big one is we have two families. Our families at home being our loved ones, our spouse or partner, and our children, but then our other family, our brothers and sisters in the stations, because we train with them. We sleep in the same quarters. We go on the same calls. We eat dinner. We work out. We are there. The shifts 24/7. Some are 24, 48s, 48, 96s. There's so many different shifts, but you're there a third of your life. And so watch out for that. At times, firefighters tend to switch. Which family is first? Is it the fire service or is it their loved ones? So understanding that dynamics of two families is very important. The question that I have to seriously ask you to ask yourself, and that is, can you work with our culture? It's difficult. So many have trouble and nightmares, counselors, when they hear the stories time and time again of all the tragic events. These are important issues. And be real to yourself. If you can't work with us, that's fine. It's all about self-care, as being in the counseling world, taking care of ourselves as well, because we do. We hear so many things as counselors and therapists. So it's important to ask that question. Are you prepared, and can you work with this culture? Terminology. Firefighter, engineer, shift commander, probie. These are so many things that we don't have enough time within this video to talk about all of the terminology, because like I stated earlier, we talk in that terminology. I've been retired 18 months and I still find myself using that terminology around the house. But plus, like I said, I travel over 110,000 air miles a year. So I see a lot of firefighters and paramedics. And so I'm still ingrained within that culture. EMT, I use that term a lot. It's an emergency medical technician. And there's different branches within the EMT. EMTB, which is basic. EMTI, which is intermediate, meaning that they can do blood pressures, they can start IVs, and then of course the top of the line is the EMT paramedic, or EMTP. And that person, as a paramedic, they can dispense the drugs and they can do the cardio shock, and they're pretty much your doctor in the field. So understanding what role they are they just an EMT, EMT intermediate, or EMT paramedic? We talk a lot about terminology. And here's a scenario that I use. I was doing a workshop for counselors, and I was talking about how two firefighters were advancing a hose line to the seat of a fire. And with them, they had their irons with them and a tick and a few other things. And me, this is the lesson I learned, is that I have to really explain the terminology. Irons meaning your axe and a Halligan bar, so that's the set called irons. And I was talking about this one firefighter had a tick, and out of the back, a hand raises from one of the counselors, and she says, Jeff, what type of nervous twitch did this firefighter have? And I started thinking, nervous twitch, and then I thought, oh no, tick. That's a thermal imaging camera. And if this counselor doesn't ask, do I imagine that she imagines this firefighter is dragging his hose line with his neck jerking to the left constantly with his nervous twitch? And so I told her, I said, I appreciate the comment, but yes, the tick is a thermal imaging camera. And so, as I alluded to, be direct. If you don't understand something when a firefighter says, some type of abbreviation, ask. Do not try to think, I think I try to figure that out later. Stop right there, be direct, and ask. SCBA, of course, that's the bottle, the pack that we wear. You add a U and it becomes a scuba. But that's our air pack, so SCBA bottle. We talked about tick, bunker gear. The boots, the pants, the Nomex hood that protects our neck and our head, the gloves. When you start putting all this gear on, you start adding 45 to 50 pounds of additional weight onto your body, and that stress, the physical aspect of it. Quarters. Some people say firehouses, some people say stations. I travel a lot in Canada. They call them fire halls. I don't know if you'll have a chance to work with any Canadian firefighters early on, but they call those halls, fire halls. Now we're going to go into something, as minor as it might seem, is very important, and that is apparatus. So many times I see people, I'll see a fire engine go by and they'll say, hey, look at the fire truck. That's not a fire truck. That's a fire engine. The pride that we have within ourselves and the rigs that we ride is very, very important. And so as we go through these PowerPoint and these pictures, we'll take a look at it. So a fire engine, that's what I wrote. I was engine 36 captain. Their main task is to go into the fire, put out the fire, do search and rescue. That's their role. Put the water on the hot stuff. We take a lot of pride. Hey, we're engineers, we're firefighters, we're engines. That's what we do. We ride backwards on the engine. A lot of pride in that. That is a truck. You see the tall ladder on the top, and you've seen it many times during news videos. You'll see a lot of water coming out from the top of the ladder up there. Their main role is ventilation, and they'll do search and rescue. We do ventilation, which is opening holes up in the roofs to let the heat and the smoke out so that the engines can go in and do their job by getting that smoke and heat out. But the pride, truckies, that's what they call themselves. Hey, we ride the truck, we're truckies. They love it. They absolutely love it. They wouldn't want to do anything else. The next slide that we have is called a squad. These are multi-talented people. They have the talent to do high-angle rescue, low grade rescues. They can do hazardous materials. They ride the squad because they're specifically talented in many different aspects. A very, very pride-oriented position within the fire service. Then we have a tender. A tender, they bring the water to the fire. In a lot of locations across the United States, there's no hydrants. And so fire departments bring tenders. They typically have about 3,000 gallons of water. And we use those, as you can see in the PowerPoint. The water is sucked out of the porta tank, and then it goes through the tank and then out the hose line up to the engine, and it feeds it like a hydrant. So that's a tender. And then, of course, the last one is an ambulance. Some people might call it the box, some call it rescue. In our recommendations, we'll talk a little bit more on how to help you get involved with understanding our language. Now that we wrapped up the terminology portion, we will now go into role play number 2.
Where do we start today?
Well, I am sick and tired of hearing my wife say, you are so angry. You get angry about everything. Look at me, even right now, I apologize. It's just I'm very quick with my anger, and I never was like that. Maybe I was, I don't know, but it's getting worse and worse. And my wife says, hey, she is not going to be hanging around in this marriage unless you get this resolved. And I love my wife. She's my best friend. We have 2 beautiful children. But she's right. At times, my anger is just so quick.
Are you only angry at home?
I'm angry at home. I'm angry at work. I'm angry at church. I'm angry everywhere for some reason.
Where is it worse?
Probably at work.
Why do you think that?
I don't know. I just it kind of developed almost overnight the way I look at it. You know, I've looked at, why are you angry? My wife says, why are you angry? And I kind of defend myself because, oh, I'm not angry. And then we get into arguments on why I'm not angry. And it goes on. And then she storms off. And
What are you so upset about at work?
you know, I don't know if I love my job. I just think at times I got a lot of idiots around me.
A lot of idiots.
I know it sounds bad. You know, we're supposed to have this camaraderie, the brotherhood and the sisterhood, but
You don't?
So I think we do, but it's I get so frustrated
About what?
that people, they just don't follow through. They don't do their job as they're assigned. You know, why do I have to be always the one following behind them and finishing the job and pulling their weight? You know, and they get mad at me, and then I take it home, and I don't want to be angry. I absolutely don't want to be angry, but as you can see, I get frustrated, and
What are they getting angry at you for at work?
because I think I'm jumping on their cases.
Example?
We're supposed to wash the rigs every day. That's just, you come to work, you wash the rigs, unless it's, you know, drought and things like that, but it's just something you do. And, you know, I had one firefighter who's on my shift. He said, well, we worked yesterday, we washed the rigs, and we didn't go out on a call with the engine, so why do we have to wash it today? I said, well, I know, but we did go on training. We went to the store, and you could see there's some mud around the rims, and there's some dust on it. Let's just wash it down. It's just part of the job. And it's like, well, do we really? Can't we just wash the tires? No, let's wash the rig. And it's just, why do I have to be that way? Why do I have to be your father and tell you what to do? You're a firefighter. I mean,
Be their father?
Well, it's the way it seems like it. You know, I've been a shift commander for so many years, and I don't want to be that way. I don't want to step over and watch every move they make. I mean, they're grown men and women.
Well, it's one thing to be a supervisor, but their father? That was kind of interesting statement.
Yeah, it's just, I seem that way. I mean, I walk through the bunk room and their clothes are all over the floor. And it's like, you know, if we have tours and things, people don't want to see this mess. Let's keep it, you know, respectful. This is your firehouse.
Where's all this coming from?
I don't understand that question.
It's like you're so fueled and like pumped up about the guys and what they will or will not do.
I know, this, like I said, and I apologize. I don't mean to be this way, and unfortunately I've apologized 1,000 times to my wife. I don't mean to be this way, but I don't understand why. Like you said, it's instant.
Who was like this? If this isn't you and you don't mean to be this way, who used to be that way? Who do you remind yourself of?
Well, I didn't know him well, but a lot of people say I'm like my father.
What do you mean you didn't know him well?
Well, he left us.
When did he leave you?
I was about 6 or 7. My brothers were 3 and 1 or so.
What happened to your family when he left? Did he visit? Was he part of supervised
No,
visits?
he just
Anything like that?
hightailed it out. Wanted his own life. Said he got married way too young. You know, I had children way too young, and he missed life, as my mom always tells us. He missed life. So he hightailed it. He hit the road.
What'd your mom do?
She cried a lot. You know, I remember, you know, 7 years old, and I said, Mom, why are you crying? You know, why are you crying? And I would always stand by the window and say, hey, when's Dad coming home? When's Dad coming home?
Did he ever?
No, I never came home. No.
So your mom had to work, had to provide?
Oh, she had to provide. Absolutely, she provided. She went and worked 2 jobs, one full-time job and then one part-time job. We had a babysitter that watched us, you know, but she gave everything to, you know, and, you know, my little brothers who are now younger than me, man, they used to play that crying game to her. Oh, we want this, and this and that, and she'd provide for them. She'd give, and I said, man, don't be that way. Mom's working 2 jobs. Can't you see that? Give her a break. You know, but it never heard from my father again. You know, but until, you know, till we heard he passed away.
When did he pass away?
It's been about a year now.
So about a year. And you're angry at work, acting like a father figure, mad that people are taking advantage of you.
Did I say father figure, or did I say that?
You said father.
I don't know why I would use that word.
I think it fits.
Well, how? Because I never had a father, so how would I know?
Well, some people gave you feedback that you were like him, and whether or not you were, they gave you the feedback that you were. And your mom worked hard, and you're telling me that your siblings took advantage of her. And then you go to work, and you're the one pushing all the work. You see a connection?
Well, I see the connection is that, am I acting like my father should have been to help oversee? I don't know. I don't know what you're trying to say.
We're talking about your anger. What's fueling your anger? What makes you so mad about the guys not, doing what they're supposed to?
Well, that's the thing, that they don't do what they're supposed to.
But why get so fired up about it? People do this all the time.
Well, they're taking advantage of me as well. I have to finish the project, or I have to get on top of them, do this, do that.
The way your siblings took advantage of mom?
God, they did too, man. She'd come home from work and they'd whine and this and that, and she could tell she was tired. I said, give her a break, man.
How come you were the one saying give her a break? Why didn't you just kind of jump in and take from her too?
Maybe because I always remember seeing her cry all the time. I felt bad for her.
Do you feel bad for yourself that you're the one doing all this work?
I don't know if I feel bad about myself. I just can't understand why other people can't pull their weight. You walk into a bunk room, why throw your clothes on the ground? Put it on the bed, or fold it and put it in your locker. I just don't understand, that reasoning.
Makes good sense, and I think a lot of us wonder those things. But how angry you are about it, that you're hurting your own marriage, and for the last year or so you're changing, it just doesn't seem worth it.
And that's true. I mean, I don't like the way I act. There's no doubt about it. I'll go home, and first thing I do, instead of saying hi and give a hug to the kids, I say, hey, who left their bike out in the driveway and this and that? I don't want to be that way. Not that I never had a father who told me differently, but I don't want to be that way.
Right. And maybe, just maybe, since he died, a lot of stuff's been stirring up in you and you're not really recognizing it, and we should be talking about that.
I had lots of friends, and we'd always have parties and stuff, and their mom and dads always came. My mom always had to be at work, and God knows where my father was.
Sounds like resentment.
Resentment to who?
Who do you think?
To the other children, because they had a father, or what?
Well, you're saying I was different than everybody else. We'd have parties and mom was gone, dad was gone. My life wasn't that great. That's what I hear you saying.
Yeah, it was a struggle. It was a struggle.
Do you think that it's a worthwhile connection to make? That since your dad died, you've become more angry, and that maybe it just reminds you of when you were younger and watching your mom getting taken advantage of, and it's just a little more frustrating at work than it usually is?
It could be a connection there, because I remember when he passed away, my thought was, you SOB. I never got a chance to ask you why you left us. Why did you do that? We never had a relationship. I talked once in a while on the phone once in a while, but that was about it. And then I never had that chance to say why. What was so important in your life that you had to leave your 3 sons?
Do you think we ought to take time to process that?
That's a lot to process.
Might be worthwhile to get the anger down at work.
It'd be more worthwhile to take the anger at home.
And that too.
I think it is something that we'll have to look at.
Very good.
So in that scenario, very common, anger at home, anger at work. What was your thought process?
As a therapist, we know that anger is a secondary emotion. It's not a primary one. We're disappointed to the point of anger. We can be tired to the point of anger. We can be heartbroken to the point of anger, but we don't just wake up and, oh, I'm pissed, Right. And we don't just start changing our behavior in sensitive places, like in a marriage or at work, for no reason. So your brain's trying to tell you something. You know, it's trying to get you to notice. And in this case, this client's father died. He didn't want to be like his, you know, siblings who took advantage of mom. Can't everybody just do what they're supposed to do? Can't dad do it? Can't everybody do their part?
Right.
And that could be very frustrating and triggering to what his childhood was like. So I kind of wanted him just to make that connection that sometimes old things that didn't seem to be a big issue can become a much, you know, more salient issue that demands some attention later when it's being triggered.
Right, and anger, like you said, takes many faces. We know in the fire service, probably the #1 issue is job promotions.
Yeah.
That anger of, hey, why did
Yeah.
that person get to be a lieutenant instead of me? I have 16 years on, they have 7.
Right.
And that anger just boils over. But what might it come down to? The anger that maybe I'm not as good as I think I am, and others test better than me. And trying to get that drawn out of them is very difficult as well.
Yeah, and that could be both. It could be a feeling of inadequacy, or it could be a feeling of unfairness. And that is the prerequisite to the anger, you know? And then there's blaming, and then misunderstanding, and a refusal to admit what's really going on. But once you kind of harness that and you get it pinpointed, then they're forced to do that in therapy, which could stop a lot of the chaos outside of therapy.
Okay, well, very good. And no doubt anger does play a role in the fire and EMS service.
Yes.
So I appreciate it, and that will be the end of Role Play 2.
Good.
Thank you.